Okay. Shall we begin, Catherine? Good. Yeah. All right. All right, everyone. Really nice to see you. So, I thought that I would talk to you today about some of the ways in which these SCT practices have informed my teaching mindfulness at this particular residential substance use treatment center here in Vancouver, and how this has informed and enriched my own SCT practice. And I hope that maybe you'll hear something in here that supports yours. So just a trigger warning to start. Um, for those who might find discussion about substance use and treatment particularly challenging, I will be exploring this a little bit and speaking about the conditions in which I work and some of the folks I work with. So just to empower you to please feel free to engage or disengage in ways that support you. So for me, this treatment center is a rich and rewarding place to offer these practices that have us as practitioners relate with and as the qualities of our basic awareness, the qualities of unconditional openness, of ever-present knowing, and of spontaneous care. These practices that have us relating with and as the warm wisdom, that's the felt knowing of the innate worthiness of all beings. And part of the reason this is such a rich place to practice and to offer practice is because there is a lot of unpredictability that's right on the surface here. And this has really informed my practice and how I share these practices in this environment. It's supported me in cultivating clarity, in embodying openness. It's had me look closely at where this practice is theoretical for me, where it's experiential. It's helped me recognize increasingly subtle layers of my own addictions to habit patterns of perception and reaction. And it's really taught me how to ongoingly and in everyday ways be an invitation or an invitation to the qualities of our basic awareness, to the wisdom that's love, the love that's wisdom. And to know these qualities to in fact be ordinary in their utter naturalness to who we most essentially are. So I'm going to start with a bit of context about the center and my role there, and then I'll talk a little bit about the kinds of conversations that are included in the classes that are really designed to support us in feeling interested in and safe to relate with and recognize these qualities of our basic awareness. So I think this should take about a half hour or so. And then we'll have some meditation practice together and a little time at the end for comments. Okay. So this is not a luxurious treatment center. It is not Malibu. The people who work there full-time, the counselors, the administrators, the various support staff, the folks who do the cooking and the cleaning, all work really hard without a lot of frills. The center's in a traditionally low-income area of East Vancouver, so it's not unusual to see drug dealing or open substance use happening in the surrounding neighborhood. And the center itself is a small building that houses about 30 or so people that live there for the duration of the treatment. And it looks and feels to me like a well-used urban walk-in medical clinic, except that all the doors that open to the outside, they're locked and alarmed. And there are cameras throughout, which you see being monitored on multiple screens at the front desk when you sign in. And the culture among the clients, so that means the people in treatment, every person is obviously a unique, complex, dynamic being. And some may have some life situations in common. So this could include coming to the center after spending some time living on the street. So they're dealing with the trauma associated with that, as well as possible injury, possible ongoing ailments like hepatitis, HIV. There may be people who have involvements with gangs or with other groups in which violence has been pervasive. There are often older people there who have had a lifetime relationship with addiction and have been in and out of rehabs many times. And then there are people of all ages who simply can't afford to go anywhere else. Sometimes young people whose families have paid for more expensive rehabs before and they can't or won't again. And other folks of all ages and backgrounds who simply don't have the $20,000 or $30,000 that it costs to go somewhere else. And all of the clients are very newly sober. So there can be a lot of instability, insecurity, resistance that feels very much on the surface here and can inspire different ways of being, guardedness, uneasiness, volatility, discomfort, restlessness, shame, resentment, and grief. The mindfulness program here also needs to accommodate the reality that I won't know who will be attending class from one week to the next, since the clients at the center are often moving around the system there unpredictably, and they're also coming and going from the center for various reasons like medical visits or court dates or housing issues. And I also share the position with a friend of mine who brought me in a few years ago to substitute ongoingly for him. So I take about a third of the classes, and I often don't know if I'm going in from week to week. And finally, these mindfulness classes, which are once a week for an hour, are mandated there. So the clients have to attend if they want to remain at the treatment center. So all of this is to illustrate that this is an environment in which there is potentially some resistance to exploring and exercising the qualities of mindfulness and of our basic awareness itself, such as receptivity and non-judgment. And there can be particular resistance to being receptive to care and to recognizing the innate goodness in themselves and in others. So for those who do decide to engage in opportunities for treatment there can be a lot of trying to be sober, trying to be well, trying to figure out what leads to using, trying to get along with everyone, trying to be a better person, a good person, a worthy person. So it can be an immeasurable relief to get a taste of these qualities of openness and care, of basic goodness and worthiness as natural, as already and entirely present in their full power, in that they are qualities of our basic space of mind, in which all activities of mind, all the thoughts and feelings we habitually prioritize relating with and as, all arise from and play out within and are permeated by and eventually dissolve back into this warm, open space of our basic awareness itself, which is the groundless ground of who we most essentially are. So my ongoing exploration at this center is, how do I support an atmosphere in which these practices feel natural, recognizable, useful, and safe, and within which the receptivity that's foundational to the felt experience of these basic qualities of awareness is more available. So I can't know what will meet me from class to class, so I don't plan exactly what class of the 10 classes I've developed. I don't know exactly which one I'll teach until I'm in the room that day for a little while and we connect, and it becomes clear to me what might be most useful. So out of the 10 classes that I've developed in this series, every class contains certain material, and then each class has its own individual theme. So for every class, I start by embodying the practice, to the best of my ability on any given day. I explain that the term mindfulness is taken from a Buddhist approach to these practices, but that the practice itself is part of many traditions, both religious and not, and that most essentially it is a way of being and a way of relating with experience that doesn't belong to any one group, but rather is innate, entirely natural to all of us, though often hidden behind the turbulence of our habits of predicting and assuming and resulting reactivity. I let them know we'll be practicing in a trauma-informed way. So this means a number of things, including giving them as much choice as possible. So to what degree to be involved, as long as they're not disturbing others. I offer choices around ways to engage in these practices, They're always empowered to take breaks, things like that. I demonstrate straw breathing. I let them know that if dysregulation does begin to arise for them, that they can ground in present moment sights or sounds or sensations in the body in a place that feels grounded and safe for them, such as the present moment sensations of their feet where they're touching the floor. And I let them know I'm always around after class to talk to if they wish. Another thing I do to try to establish some degree of the trust that's necessary for receptivity is to use quotes from experts in various fields of psychology or neuroscience or from contemplatives. And I also use metaphors or anecdotes to help ground what could sound like theory into real life examples that are hopefully recognizable and relatable. So there are two key points we discuss in every class together. One is an understanding of mindfulness as presentness, receptivity, non-judgment, and care. And the second point is that these qualities are natural qualities of the space of our basic awareness. So they are who we most essentially are, before, beneath, beyond any labels we might identify ourselves and others as. I explained that our exploration will be both developmental, in which we're training towards certain qualities like presentness and openness, and discovery, in which we recognize these qualities as ever-present innate qualities of the basic space of awareness itself. So I've obviously had to synthesize and distill a lot of what we discuss and practice in these classes, and I thought what I would bring here today is a little bit about how we unpack the terms receptivity and non-judgment, and then how this can lead naturally, either implicitly or explicitly, to discussing spontaneous care and innate goodness, which can be challenging topics in this often heavily protected culture. And because these qualities of our basic awareness are experientially intertwined, I often find it useful to start by exploring what we mean by receptivity and non-judgment. So we start by identifying through conversation where receptivity is useful in life, here and now, right here in the treatment center, and some points that folks raise. I'll just pull this up. They say that receptivity is essential to listening, to learning, to respect, to working together, to being present, to understanding different perspectives, to being in relationships, to conflict resolution, to caring, to healing. And then we acknowledge that although we may understand the importance of receptivity in theory, sometimes being receptive can feel difficult. Sometimes we want to be receptive, but it feels effortful or inaccessible, like a battle against all the parts of us that want to assert themselves instead. Sometimes parts of us might feel resistant to the idea of being receptive because they're afraid that it will result in overwhelm. Or perhaps we think training in receptivity is to be training towards weakness, submissiveness. And then we talk about how the kind of receptivity mindfulness has us relate with and as can be the antidote to these concerns that these different parts of us may hold. So how is this true? We explore how, from the perspective of mindfulness, receptivity is the opening to the space of mind that precedes our predictions and our biases. So when we're receptive, we're relating more with what's actually there than with our expectations and projections, our assumptions and snap judgments. So rather than weaken us, receptivity empowers us with a clearer view and a more complete understanding of what we're relating with, offering us the opportunity to respond from a depth of being that is free from being bound and pushed around by unseen habits of reactivity. I let them know that when we sit in and as this space of mind that's naturally present, naturally warmly receptive, we learn to see and see through the preconceptions we otherwise unconsciously overlay onto experience. In this way, we learn to recognize the difference between reacting to the labels and presumptions we often mistake things for, and our present moment direct felt experience of them. And how through this seeing and seeing through, this feeling and feeling through, our experience of world, of others, and self can open and transform. I let them know that receptivity is foundational to mindfulness-based interventions that are designed to support us in relating with feelings associated with various forms of stress, like John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction and John McCransky and Paul Condon's sustainable compassion training, the latter of which I tell them this mindfulness training is heavily influenced by. And SCT reminds us that both the traditional trajectory of mindfulness practices in varied traditions over time and a trauma-sensitive approach are to first ourselves become receptive to the qualities of spaciousness, of presentness, and warmth. Knowing, feeling, resting in, and eventually as these qualities, which are qualities from our own basic awareness. And from that space, we include, embody receptivity to what arises for us. So in this way, people start to understand that it's in the warm, boundless openness of our natural awareness that all parts of us, including the parts that want to be heard, the parts that want to avoid overwhelm, the parts worried about training towards being weak or submissive, all parts are honored through being offered space to be, space in which they can be fully known and safely felt, rather than reacted to through contracted impulsiveness and largely unconsciously acted out or exiled through suppression. And as I say this, I remind them that we're always working gently, always within our window of tolerance, starting small and building from there like we would with anything that we want to learn and know well. I emphasize again our natural proclivities for receptivity, that receptivity can be both developed and discovered. And we practice in ways that are intended to give us an experiential taste of our basic awareness being naturally receptive like space. So space is ever present. It's open. It's still and boundaryless. Space doesn't move to control what arises in it. It doesn't narrow to confront or grip to capture. It doesn't brace against or lift itself away from what appears within it. This present, limitless space of awareness knows what arises, but is not pushed around by it, like sky is not pushed around by the weather. Space is free and offers freedom. The space of awareness is receptive in its unconditional openness with whatever appears, welcoming all just as it is. So that leads us nicely to talking about non-judgment, which in part is this capacity for seeing and seeing through our surface snap judgments that, although may hold some truth for us, we commonly take to be the whole truth about whatever it is we're perceiving in the world, in another, in ourselves. So I emphasize that non-judgment in this practice does not mean that we're training in no longer being discerning. It isn't training in not seeing or not knowing or not responding to the differences between something safe for us or for others and something harmful for us or for others, for example. This mindful non-judgment is not only able to clearly discern, it's also aware of and not drawn into the closing off of care that is often an unseen, unwise component of judgment, a habit of hardening the heart that so often accompanies saying no, a cold turning away from that can automatically be a part of identifying something as unpleasant for us or unjust. So in real world applications, this mindful non-judgment could look like the ability to say no, to set boundaries, to be uncomfortable without losing our capacity for care and for our most informed responsiveness. So this might sound like a tall order, but again, the good news is that non-judgment is a natural quality of the space of our basic awareness. So we explore where we might see this non-judgment alive in ourselves already, naturally in ordinary ways, fully formed. Chances are we're already practicing this in ways we may not consciously recognize. So I like to use an example here that one way this kind of non-judgment might be occurring naturally is in relating with animals if you're someone who easily loves animals. So in this case, you could see an animal or a reptile, let's say a rattlesnake. You could see a rattlesnake, even a rattlesnake that's shaking its rattle at you, indicating that if you come too close, it will strike. So you could see this, you could discern the danger, discern the snake's intention, discern that this means you need to be thoughtful about the ways in which you're going to interact with this creature, with this being. And you could discern all of this and still be in the felt wishing for the rattlesnake to be well and free, even willing to do what you could for it if it were in trouble, safely, of course. So there's a baked-in component of felt care to this non-judgment. I use a quote here from Lama John, who says, "The basic wish for a being to be well and free is the basic wish of love." So when we have a felt understanding in whatever area that's easy and alive for us to experience this non-judgment, we can start then to be curious about and to sense into what it might be like to then bring that felt knowing of receptivity and warm non-judgment in a safe way for us to relationships with parts of ourselves and with others with whom we may have habits of judgment and subsequent reaction around. So once we've discussed and established the ways in which non-judgment and receptivity support us, and in fact, seeing more clearly and responding from a place of wise discernment and natural care rather than reactivity, and that these qualities are not other than who we or anyone else is, but rather are qualities of our basic awareness itself. I usually use at this point a quote or an anecdote to support our exploring further, and these generally take the direction of exploring either seeing and seeing through the labels to the direct experience of that which the label is trying to capture and contain, or ways in which to experience the natural qualities of awareness that are innate present openness, basic goodness, and spontaneous care. So for the last few minutes, I'll just use a portion from one of these classes that I call the naturalness of present openness. And the theme is, so where do we see spontaneous care naturally as ordinary in ourselves and in others? So I start by reminding everyone that we've been working with these two themes that are interconnected. One being a definition of mindfulness that is to be present and non-judgmental and warmly receptive. And the other being that this space of our basic awareness that is knowing and open and has a felt quality of warmth or care is innate, is ever present and always available before and beneath and beyond the conceptual activity of mind, the labels and subsequent story making and chains of reaction that we have deep habits of prioritizing and identifying as. And because of this ongoing momentum of these habits, it can be difficult to recognize this non-judgmental space of awareness and its qualities of spontaneous openness and care as being natural, foundational, more truly who you are and who anyone else is than any labels we may ascribe to ourselves and to others. But when we look for evidence of this innate goodness, this spacious and spontaneous care, proof through seeing it for ourselves, experiencing it for ourselves, it's very much findable easily in simple everyday ways all the time if we simply learn to look for it. So are there examples in our world where in very ordinary and spontaneous ways, we're seeing this way of being modeled, even if just for a moment? So there are a couple of anecdotes that I commonly use here. And the first one is from a YouTube video that my wife showed me of a puppy who had just been brought to his new home for the first time. And the poor little guy was terrified. So the video is shot from the side, And you could see the little puppy, he's lying flat on the floor. And he pushed his little head between two large pots in this kind of, if I can't see you, then you can't see me sort of thing. But you can see his little body trembling, and you can hear from between the two pots his whimpering and crying. And then the camera pulls back to reveal just behind the puppy, close but not touching, is a pit bull who is also lying down. And this big pit is gazing at the puppy with big, soft eyes, not moving, but very relaxed and quiet. And as the puppy continues to cry, the big pit just rests there behind the puppy in this warmly witnessing way. Just a still, relaxed, spacious presence with this puppy and with all of the commotion that is this puppy's fear. Just present and calm, just spaciously letting it all run its course, letting it all unwind, just warmly letting be. And then the next clip was the two of them playing sometime later that same day. The big dog, so gentle, and the little pup now flinging himself around with joyful abandon. The second anecdote I use is something similar to this that I saw at the playground with my nephew Liam. He was 3 years old at the time. And he was having a great time running around, showing off for me, laughing and playing. And we were the only ones there at the playground until we saw another little boy, a few years older, maybe 6, who was approaching the playground holding hands with his dad. And he was walking slowly. From a distance, you could tell he was visibly very sad. His shoulders rounded, his head low, his eyes downcast. And as he got closer, it was clear that he'd been doing a lot of crying. His eyes were still red, his face puffy. And so he and his father sat down on a bench about 20 feet or so from us. And Liam had stopped playing when he noticed the sad boy. And he stood still and quiet, watching the boy and his father sitting there. And after a minute, Liam quietly walked over to the boy, who was still sitting slouched and looking down at the ground. And Liam crouched all the way down right in front of the little boy. And he looked up gently into his face. And the boy didn't respond. And when Liam stood up quietly, he walked all the way around this boy until he was about 10 feet behind him. And then Liam sat down. He folded his little hands in his lap. And with his eyes resting gently on the boy's back, Liam just sat, quiet, still, open, wordlessly with and warmly letting be this boy and his sadness. So there's something so beautiful for me in those two examples. It's such nobleness that's also such naturalness. It's inspiring, except that inspiring usually means to wish to become at some future time. And this way of being is natural, spontaneous, innate, meaning right here, right now, and always, and not partly, but completely. Evidence of this inner resource of ever-present spontaneous care is happening all the time, if we learn to notice. Just like in the anecdotes about the dogs and the two little boys. And perhaps in your response to hearing those stories, there was a subtle, spontaneous opening and reaching of the heart that is the languageless expression of this underlying power of natural goodness and care. In fact, this inner power of care is so ever-present and so spontaneous that parts of us are regularly in the doing that is closing off from this energy and expression of spontaneous care. We may notice this when we engage with the news, when we scroll through our news feed on our phones. There can be a kind of lurking apprehension, prepared to shut down this power of care that could arise unprompted upon reading about another's suffering. So in this practice of mindfulness, we can offer these protective parts of us the space and care they currently see as separate from who they are. We sit in and as, like both Liam and the dog modeled, spacious, warm presence, within which all surface expressions are warmly let be, to find their own best way to relax, unwind, and rest, while we embody the space that recognizes their unchanging depth as innate, profound worthiness. Okay. I thought I thought maybe we could do a little meditation, um, and then we'll have time for comments. I was thinking we could do uh, some abdominal breathing and then a brief receptive mode to prime us for some letting bees, if that sounds good to you guys. Yeah. Okay, so maybe a little bit of stretching. That was a lot of sitting. And then we'll just begin with some abdominal breathing that supports us in bringing the energy down from the thinking mind into the body. So feeling the present moment sensations as we gently and deliberately breathe into the belly so it expands, feeling it expanding. And then feeling the abdomen relax naturally as the breath is released. So sensing deeply into the belly as we breathe, feeling the movement of the belly from deep within the belly. And then relaxing any doing of the breath, of breathing, and just allowing the breath to find its own natural rhythm. Allowing all to settle deeply. And now we'll do a brief receptive mode. So feel free to use whatever way of accessing that you'd like to. And just a reminder of the three classic ways of accessing receptive mode. So a caring moment, or a benefactor or a spiritual field, and bringing them to mind as being here now. Sensing them right here, right now. Feeling the warmth of their presence as they see and see through all of your surface expressions to the depth of your being. The depth of your being that is clear and simple openness and goodness. So once those qualities are alive for us in a felt way, here and now, the warmth and spaciousness of unconditional care, we can gently release any visual image and rest directly in these qualities. Relaxing increasingly into feeling these qualities, receiving these qualities. Becoming increasingly porous to these qualities of unconditional openness and the warmth of care. Steeping in these qualities, evoked from the space of our deepest knowing and being. And if at any point in the meditation we lose the feeling of these qualities, we can simply refresh our visualization and allow those qualities to arise and rest again in those. And then proceed with the meditation and remain resting in those if we wish. And now the 3 letting bees. So resting in these qualities. We warmly know letting be the sensations of the body as a whole. Letting sensations of body draw us into them more and more. Noticing any areas of tension in the body, any doing of tension, and spaciously letting the feeling of doing, of trying, simply rest into being. Simply letting body be. Letting body, body. The second letting be as a breath of breathing. So here we're letting the breath be just as it is, perfect as it is. Letting felt sensations of breathing draw us in more and more. Letting breath breathe you. Noticing any holding on or otherwise managing the breath, any doing to or doing within the breath. And spaciously warmly letting any feelings of doing rest. Letting any feelings of doing rest in and into the space of simply being, of letting be, simply letting breath be. And now letting be of mind, letting awareness hold its own ground. And again, gently noticing any doing, any holding on to movements of mind, such as thinking, and just letting any feeling of doing rest in and into the still open space of simply being, letting be, letting awareness hold its own ground. And now let all constructs, all frameworks, any felt sense of meditating be. allowing all to relax and rest into this open space of wordless knowing and warmth. Allowing the mind to gently fall open like space. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. So we have 10 minutes for comments or conversation or just to continue to sit, however you're feeling.